Okay, so sometimes in-laws can make outrageous requests, but I feel like in Korea, it's on a whole nother level. Maybe a little higher. A little higher. Perfect.
Let it bounce.
Hello, friends and family. This is Megan Moon, aka Talent 미국 사람입니다. Okay, so on JTBC, which is a news channel in Korea, there's a segment called 사건 판정. And people send in their crazy stories and they ask for advice and the news anchors sort of share their opinion about it, etc. Sometimes on there's some in-laws making outrageous requests and people are asking, am I being a bad daughter-in-law or son-in-law for not filling this request? The first one, the family was crazy pressuring and trying to gaslight this man who's named Mr. Jin. So they just call him Jin-shi. So Mr. Jin has been married for a couple of years. Let's just call her Mrs. Jin. They never said the name or anything. In Korea, you don't take the last name of your spouse when you get married, but we're just gonna call him Mr. and Mrs. Jin. And Mrs. Jin's father loves to drink. He's an alcoholic. He has at least one bottle of soju every day. That is a lot. First of all, that's like over 1,000 extra calories, all going straight to your liver. But Mr. Jin actually doesn't drink at all. He's someone who really cares about his health, so not even one sip of alcohol when they go out. It's this thing, like older people in Korea who like to drink, they expect that younger people should drink with them. Like it's your duty to drink with this old person. Like how dare you be a rude young person and not drink with this old person who wants to drink. So the father-in-law always hated that Mr. Jin did not drink with him and he always complained about him. But one day, father-in-law was walking around and he just suddenly passed out. Goes to the doctor, and what do you think is wrong with him? Obviously, his liver is dead. And the doctor says, you really gotta stop drinking. Father-in-law did not stop drinking because he is an alcoholic. He said, F my liver, I'm gonna continue to have my at least one bottle, but usually several bottles of soju every day. A few months later, he's walking around and passes out again. Goes back to the doctor, and the doctor's like, look, sir, you have got maybe 3 months of life left if you continue drinking like this. And your liver is so far gone now that if we want to save you, we would have to give you a liver transplant. Now, father-in-law has one daughter and one son. His daughter, Mrs. Jin, she actually is A-type blood type, but her brother is B-type blood type, which is the same as the father-in-law. Now, nowadays, for liver transplants, you don't actually have to be the same blood type to do it. So that doesn't matter anyway, but father-in-law has 2 kids who could give him a liver transplant. For whatever reason, Mrs. Jin refused to even go to the doctor to inquire about it. And the son is like, I can't give you my liver because my wife and I are preparing to get pregnant. Yeah, we're preparing to get pregnant. But it's like, sir, are you the one getting pregnant? You can go get the surgery and then try and impregnate your wife a few months after, right? Mr. Jin is the same blood type as father-in-law. So the family are like, let's ask Mr. Jin. So the mom-in-law would come over to Mr. and Mrs. Jin's house. She would make side dishes and the food that she would make for them. This food is good for your liver. She would do all the cleaning and she would say stuff like, 진씨 있어서 우리 남편 살 것 같아. Oh, look, thanks to you, my husband's gonna live. Even though nothing had been decided yet. The manipulation, insane. Even his wife was pressuring him. She was saying stuff like, 우리 아빠 간 이식하면 평생 잘할게. But like, as a wife, shouldn't you be doing your best in the marriage anyway? So Mr. Jin would tell them, you do realize that you don't have to have the same blood type nowadays. Like, you can also give your father some of your liver. But this is the messed up part. Mrs. Jin and mother-in-law, whenever Mr. Jin would say that, they would pretend like they didn't hear him or like change the subject. What? I think I gotta go over here. What? Oh, you need me? Hello? 여보세요? So they never acknowledge him when he brings that up in conversation. Like, how old are these people to be like, la la, la 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 la? Let's grow up. So he started feeling the pressure. So he was like, okay, let me go to the doctor's office and at least get a check and see what the doctor is saying about it anyway. And the doctor's like, I don't recommend that you give your liver because 1, you're definitely gonna regret it. And 2, there's no guarantee that it's gonna go well. And then also the man refuses to stop drinking. So what are we doing? We're just giving him a liver so that he can continue to drink, you know? So the doctor is against it. So Mr. Jin went to them and told them definitively, I am not giving you my liver. And then immediately the whole attitude of the mom-in-law and daughter, Mrs. Jin, changed. They suddenly started being super cold to him. And she would say snide remarks to him like, 진 씨는 사위 아니야. You're not really a son-in-law. 어떻게 가족한테 그렇게 거절을 해? How dare you refuse your family like that? So they couldn't get him with the sweetness and the honey, so they were like, let's bring on the shame and guilt and insults. So the mom-in-law even was like, I don't even want to have your phone number anymore. And apparently she deleted his phone number out of her phone. There's not really a big loss there, right? You're thinking about it like, yeah, the mom-in-law could be upset, and it doesn't really matter what the mom-in-law thinks, but the wife has also jumped on the guilt bandwagon, and she's ignoring her husband completely. So when he comes home, she doesn't talk to him, doesn't look at him. And they have a young daughter. They didn't exactly say the age, but we do know that she's over 1, so between 1 and 2. And so whenever Mr. Jin would go and try and hold his daughter, the wife would turn away and wouldn't let him hold his daughter. Yeah. And she would try and guilt him by saying things like, 너 때문에 우리 아빠 죽으면 어떡해? Like, because of you, if my dad dies, then what are you going to do about it? Right? Like saying that it's your fault if my dad died. Right? It's not my dad's fault because he's been drinking freaking alcohol and the doctor's been telling him to stop drinking for so long. I cannot with these enabling ass families. If your daddy dies, it's his own fault for drinking every day. Okay? It is nobody else's. Or your own fault because you refused to give him your liver. But it's like the daughter even refused to go and get exam. It's like, if your own son refuses to give you a liver, what in the hell makes you think that somebody else's son is gonna give you the liver, especially when you don't even have a good relationship? But to guilt a man into giving up a liver is wild. So apparently it's gotten so bad that he's considering divorce, and that's why he wrote into JTBC. But the divorce lawyer on the show said, you know, you can't really use that as grounds for divorce. Like it would have to be some sort of physical abuse, like they would have to be like hitting you or something like that. So unless his wife agrees to the divorce and they do the agreement divorce, then he's kind of stuck in that situation. Chana Rose 069 is like, get it together. You need to get it together, okay? 꼭 이혼하세요. Please get a divorce from this woman, because that's horrible. Like if they're pressuring you to do something like that, like you gotta know, even if they do overcome this and everybody decides to stop ignoring you, right? Eventually, whatever they want in the future, they're gonna continue to try and guilt you into. And if they could try and guilt you into giving up your own liver, what else will it be? That's not the kind of family you want to be mixed up with. I'm sorry, but they got to go. And this next story was sent by someone. They just called her Mrs. Kim Shi, and they called her husband Mr. Kim Shi. Mrs. Kim has been married to Mr. Kim for 20 years, and throughout the marriage, the mom-in-law was just an asshole to her. Like, am I the asshole? Yes, you are, ma'am. So it's customary for daughter-in-laws and sons to like give the in-laws money on special occasions. So the daughter-in-law would give her mom-in-law a couple $100, but then the next time they met up, the mom-in-law would have bought, you know, gifts for her 2 daughters, and then she would give the 2 daughters the gifts in front of the daughter-in-law and be like, yeah, I got it with the money that you gave me for my daughters, my real daughters. 너는 남의 집 딸이야. You're someone else's daughter. Why would I buy someone else's daughter some makeup products? Like, go get it from your own mom. You know, she's trying to be a right? Like, she's got it out for this particular daughter-in-law. And along with that, on the major holidays, like the daughter-in-law was expected to do all the cooking, but the mom-in-law didn't make her own daughters cook. So there's some discrimination in that way, right? And then this is something that's so strange to me. In Korea, a lot of older people give out their inheritance to their kids, like while they're still alive. And in a lot of cases, like I heard that people do it to bribe their kids in order to take care of them when they're old. So this mom-in-law gave the inheritance out to the 4 siblings of Mr. Kim. The older brother, he got a lot of land. He just sold it right away and got like hundreds of thousands of dollars right away. The 2 younger daughters, she gave $50,000 cash each. And to the second son, Mr. Kim, they gave him the house that the mother and father-in-law are currently living in. And it's an old country house. Like old country houses have a lot of repairs and whatnot that they need. And then also when you transfer houses like that, you have to pay a lot of taxes on it. Mr. and Mrs. Kim are in financial trouble at the moment, but they have to pay all of the taxes on that house. So they had to sort of take out a loan in order to do that. On top of that, that old crusty house, every time it needs a repair or something, the mom-in-law would call up Mr. Kim and say, hey, landlord, you need to fix this. So basically the parents gave them the house so that they could foot all the repairs and whatnot. Like that's not really an inheritance. Mr. Kim, why would you take that? If I were you, I would be like, no, we're not in a good financial place. You keep that house, you take care of it. When you pass, I'll take it. So I don't even know why he agreed to accept the house right away. Now that you got some background, let's move on to the request. So the mom-in-law was having problems with her stomach, so she went to the doctor and she was diagnosed with having stomach cancer, but it's in the very early stages, so if she just has a surgery, they cut it out, she's fine. So this mother-in-law has the gall to ask her daughter-in-law to quit her job so that she can go and take care of her for a few months after her surgery. Yeah, Mrs. Kim is too nice. If it was me, I would say, you know, you're not my mom. Why don't you ask one of your real children to take care of you? Can you imagine if you're in a situation where you have to wait on her hand and foot, if she already treats you like that, like how much more of a bitch is she gonna be? You have to help her to the bathroom. This woman who's been treating you like garbage for 20 years? Absolutely not. But apparently her other kids did not want to take care of her, so Mr. and Mrs. Kim said, why don't you hire a nurse? Hiring a nurse to take care of someone is about $2,500 a month for the house, and I'm like, first of all, the two younger daughters just got $50,000 each. The older son sold the land and got a bunch of money. Why don't the actual kids who just received a bunch of money put in the money to get her a nurse? But for whatever reason they don't, probably because their mom is a butthole. And she knows that Mr. and Mrs. Kim are not that good financially, but she wants her to quit her job to take care of her. And it's so interesting because this situation I've heard of happening so many times here. It seems like the sentiment is they don't want to bother their kids. In a lot of cases, the kids don't want to do it anyway. But in the cases where the kids would have possibly done it, they don't want to bother and inconvenience their own kids. But you, because you're beneath my kids, like I'll put that burden on you. I don't want to burden my kids, but I'm going to burden you because you're someone else's daughter. Basically is the mentality. And in the comments, the Korean people were saying the same thing because especially historically, daughter-in-laws were sort of in the house and they were the lowest ranked. And they basically were in the house to like serve the parents. There are a very small amount of people still who see the daughter-in-law as someone to serve the parents-in-law. But Mr. and Mrs. Kim also have two kids that she's taking care of. They have to send them to hagwons, the academies. So they're not in a situation where Mrs. Kim can just quit her job. So the mom-in-law was okay, if you quit your job, I'll give you $30,000 in cash and you can have that for taking care of me. But it's like, if you have $30,000, then you could hire a nurse because it's only $2,500 a month. You have lots of months of nurse care for that amount of money. But the mom-in-law's like, no, I don't want a nurse. I want you. There is another reason. So Mrs. Kim's mom, back when her and Mr. Kim first got married, actually had stomach cancer, but they only discovered it in the last stages. And Mrs. Kim is the only child, and her father actually passed away when she was very, very young. So she quit her job so that she could be with her mom. Her mom sadly passed away after a couple months. But that was almost 20 years ago when she was younger and more able to get a job. But now they're in their 50s, and in Korea, it's actually not easy to get a job when you're older. And she has a pretty decent job as an accountant at a medium-sized company. She can't just leave that job. The mom-in-law is saying, you're being a bad son and daughter-in-law. So that's why she wrote into JTBC to inquire about it. And of course, the news hosts were like, no, definitely don't quit your job. Even for that like $30,000 that she's trying to give you, it's not enough, right? Especially if you can't get a job after, she's finished getting care. So everybody's like, absolutely not. Mrs. Kim, please don't quit your job and don't be pressured and guilted by her. The last crazy request that we get from JTBC Sakon Panjang is a little bit lighter. I thought we should end on a lighter note. It is one that we could be divided on. Like in the comments, some people were divided. And I think depending on what culture you're from or the relationship you have with your parents, you could also be divided on this. So Mr. and Mrs. Kim used to live in Paju, which is the city I live in. Paju. So technically Paju is not Seoul. It's in Gyeonggi-do, which is the province right around Seoul. So from Paju to like getting to Hongdae only takes 25 minutes by car, right? So technically it's not in Seoul, but it's very close by car. And depending on where you're going in Seoul, it's very drivable. So Mr. and Mrs. Kim, they were in Paju, but then they decided to move to Seoul. And they moved about an hour and a half drive away from their parents' house. So they were having a housewarming party. So mother and father-in-law came to the housewarming party, and they assumed because it's just an hour and a half drive that after dinner, the parents are going to drive back home. But they didn't. They got there and the parents-in-law were like, okay, you need to prepare your bedroom for us to sleep in because we're going to sleep here and then we're going to go home tomorrow. Oh, you want to stay over, but then you want to sleep in our bed. I think the bedroom that's like this couple's space. So I'll prepare, some things in the living room for you. But mom-in-law was not having it. She was like, oh, 어르신한테 그렇게 대접하냐? How dare you treat old people like that? And then there was a big fight that ensued. So this little apartment in Seoul, it has 3 rooms. It has the master bedroom. Then they call it a chimibang, which is like a hobby room. So I'm assuming there's like some desks and whatnot in there, sort of like an office room with like books and whatnot. And then there is a clothing room. So in Korean places, they don't have closets like built into the walls. So typically one of the bedrooms you have to make just into a full walk-in closet. So the daughter-in-law was like, you guys could sleep on the living room. We'll get you some blankets out on the floor. Like it's fine, especially because a lot of older Korean people sleep on the floor anyway. And if they do have a bed, it's like hard, like a rock. I'm not even just being hyperbolic. by saying the mattress is hard as a rock, but literally there are some beds that old people have that is a rock and it plugs into the wall and then it sort of heats up because they like sort of heated floors. It's not like, maybe they're old and they need to be on a nice mattress because their bones are hurting. Like old Korean people just like sleeping on the floor. Everywhere you go to the sauna, you want to sleep, you get a mat, you sleep on the floor. When you go to the doctor's office or you go to get any sort of treatment, you're on a very, very hard surface. But apparently the mom-in-law went berserk. Like, how dare you treat us like that and not let us go in your bedroom? First of all, she didn't even ask, hey, is it okay if we stay the night? Nobody's drunk. An hour and a half is not that far to be saying, hey, let us sleep here. We're sleeping in your bed. I think a lot of old people here just feel entitled that their kids or anyone younger than them should do whatever the hell they want. I think that probably was the thing that irked Mrs. Kim the most. Because I think most like nice people, like let's say you guys were tired and didn't want to drive home. I think if the attitude was, hey, we're really tired. Is it okay if we sleep here? We'll sleep anywhere, whatever you can prepare for us. I think you might be more tempted to say, hey, well, why don't you take the bed? We'll sleep on the floor or something. I don't know. I think it's the entitled attitude that makes it worse. But for me personally, if my parents came and asked to sleep in my bed, I probably would say no too. Because to me, it's like, that's more of like marital base. If I was single in like a little apartment and they came to visit, to me, it's a bit different. Like when you're married, like this is our space, Anywho, so in the comments, most people were saying, and nowadays, not so much, but there are still some people who are saying, well, that's how we treat old people. Like it's more of like if you have the old values or the new values. So I wanted to ask you guys, when your parents come over, do they sleep in your bed or do they sleep on the floor if you don't have actual proper accommodations for them, or do they go and stay in a nearby hotel, etc.? But yeah, so users CJATS, long username is like, 안방에서 하루 주무시는 게 문제가 아니라. So the issue is not like sleeping in the bedroom. It's just like the mindset that they have, right? That they are entitled to that behavior, which everyone hates. And then there's someone else. Ooh, she's a mom-in-law. I am a mom-in-law, and I think it's weird to want to sleep in your kid's room. I don't think that that's a good thing. In this case, they definitely should have just went home because it's not that far. And it's probably something that's quite burdensome for the kids. Like, let's not do that. And then other people in the comments are saying, I don't understand why you would have to give up your bedroom, for the kids. Like, my in-laws would never ask that of us because they're good, decent human beings. But there are some people who, in their culture, that might be common to do so, and that's fine. Not looking down on you. That's why I'm curious to know what you think in the comments. This was funny. So somebody was like, back in the day when people came over, we just put out, the mats on the floor. Like, everybody in their house has those mats. We have them. They're called yo. I slept on a yo for years when I was single. I was like, why am I buy a bed for it? I actually sleep on a yo right now. I sleep on the floor. My husband doesn't like the floor, so he sleeps on the bed, but I sleep on the floor. Coco Melon 7025 was like, if it was the dad-in-law who was saying he wants to sleep in his daughter's bed, that they would think that something was wrong with him. And that's definitely true. Like, I don't know if you watch old Korean dramas, like when, even if it's like a king or royalty person, they're sitting in their big main like chair in the room, and then the servants bring in whoever it is. If that person is above them or like a parent, then they move from their seat and their parent comes and takes the big seat, and then they sit in the lesser seat, like in front. So back in the day, I guess if your parents came or somebody higher than you came, then you give them the best like space in the house, and there's no issue with that. But times have changed, and there are still some people who have that sort of old mentality of thinking that they're entitled to that sort of treatment. You are not a nobleman. That era has passed. But this daughter-in-law was asking, am I the a-hole to JTBC? And they were like, absolutely not. You are not the a-hole, and you do not have to give up your bedroom to your in-laws. They need to get it together. Go home and sleep. But also the older generation still likes to assert their dominance over the younger generation. It's just like something that they do sometimes without even realizing it. It's not, we're not equal people who need to respect each other. It's like, I'm up here and you're down here. And that's just sort of how they've been taught. So sometimes without even knowing it, they have that I'm above you mentality, and they might do or say stuff. And then you kind of got to check them and be like, hey, it's not how things are. Even just today, like at this studio, I was up at the convenience store just now buying like a little coffee. And the woman sees me all the time at the studio. So she was like, hey, do you have kids? We like to call people so-and-so's mom. And so I was like, oh yeah, my kids' name are Luna and Ruben. So she's like, oh, should I call you Luna Oma? And I was like, no, nowadays young people don't really do that. It's not that personal. You can call me my name. And she was like, oh, okay. So what is your name? And then finally I told her my name because we like talk a lot. She's older. She's probably like 60s. People like her, like, don't have a hard time like blending in, but there are some old people who in this conversation, if I said, oh yeah, young people don't want to be called that, she would say, what are you talking about? I'm gonna call you that. And then every time I went to that convenience store, she would call me Luna Oma, Luna Oma, Luna Oma. And then I would stop going to that convenience store. Anyway, I ramble on. Mrs. Kim, you do not need to give her the room, okay? And that's where we're gonna end that today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I don't know if you liked this segment. There's so many JTBC things that happen on the news. If you want me to keep doing more of these like small JTBC stories about, you know, in-laws or husband-wife relationships or just societal stuff, then let me know and I'll keep doing it down below. If there are any particular topics that you want me to cover in these, like this time we talked about requests, but you know, if there are other situations that you would like me to find stories about and share, then let me know down below. And any other feedback you have about this segment, let me know down below because it's the first time I'm trying it. But if it goes well and you like it, then we can try and do stuff like this more often. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked the video and like to see more videos, please subscribe to my YouTube page down below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, like me on Facebook, and I will see ya.